Hi everyone, my name is Ben Rogers. Today I'll be talking about how special and gen ed classes, mainly for language arts, are different. Sure, there may be some overlap in how special and gen ed classes work, but there is a difference, if a slight one at that. So sit tight and I'll get to the interviewees. Oh, and by the way, if you do have them, it's just by coincidence. No one asked me to do these teachers. Anywho, yeah. See you in their classrooms.
So my name is Marcella Murphy, and I'm a language arts and avid teacher here at Mount Si High School.
Okay, so what Gen Ed originally made
When was general education originally made?
for language arts, yeah?
I think it's always been there. We've always had general education, language arts.
Okay, so why general education out of everything out there?
Why did I choose it?
Yeah.
Oh, I chose, I have a degree in English, and that's what I wanted to teach because I enjoy literature and I enjoy writing, and the jobs are just there for general education.
Okay. So, who was your inspiration?
Oh, that's a good question. My inspiration as a teacher, I actually have 4. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So my 7th grade language arts teacher was an amazing person. Her name is Ellen Rowe. I'm still friends with her 40 years later. And she was just an amazing teacher, very enthusiastic, and loved literature and writing. And then I had another, did I say 4? I think I only have 3. I had another English teacher in high school where we had a literary magazine, so people did creative writing, and we actually had a school magazine, and I was the editor of that, and that was an amazing experience. And then when I student taught, the teacher that I was with as a student teacher, her name is Karen Lackman, and she is an unbelievable teacher and taught me a lot about how to get along with students and how to get students to hopefully enjoy what's going on in the classroom.
Okay. So, final thing, please tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I love teaching at Mount Si High School. I can walk to work now. I used to have to travel 3.5 hours a day when I taught at Vashon Island High School, and drive and take a ferry and take a bus just to get to work. So I walk to school in less than 10 minutes, so that's really awesome. I love living in the valley. I like to bike, I like to fly fish, and I just love hanging out with teenagers.
Okay, thank you.
You're so welcome.
My name's Eric Bjorkland. This is my 2nd year at Mount Si High School. I'm a special education teacher. And I would like to tell you a little bit about myself before I take questions from Mr. Rogers. Education to me started over 12 years ago. And for the first 6 years, I went ahead and substitute taught at in Issaquah, Snoqualmie, and Seattle for grades K, kindergarten, all the way through grades 12. Originally, I was going to become a history teacher, but back in 2008, the stock market crash changed that. After the stock market crash, a lot of teachers, especially history teachers, didn't retire, and that avenue, that job avenue, dried up. Also at the time, I had my first child and turned down a history teaching job so I could stay home with her and take care of her 3 days a week while I went out and subbed 2 days a week. Some of my experiences, I taught 3 summers. It's been a while. 3 summers out at Echo Glen, juvenile facility out there near exit 25. I taught 2 years at a behavior school, which is a self-contained location for students who present a danger to themselves or others. And then, of course, my substitute teaching experience gives me a unique perspective when dealing with each student on an individual basis. So that's just a little bit about me. Some other things, went to the University of Washington many years ago where I met my wife. And then I've lived in the Valley for 12 years, and currently we are up in Trucktown, Upper Trucktown, not Lower Trucktown. So one of the questions I think Mr. Rogers wanted me to answer today was why special education? Well, one of the reasons obviously was from a career standpoint it made sense since not a lot of people, not a lot of teachers go into special education. And as I mentioned earlier, in 2008 the stock market crashed and history teaching jobs were not as plentiful as they are today. So that's one reason why I got into special education. Not the main reason or the most important reason, but just one. It was a strategic move on my part to procure a job to support myself and my family. The most important reason, and one that I'd like to share with you today, comes from my background in history from the University of Washington. I studied history at the University of Washington, and oftentimes in the back of my mind, I remember societies and cultures that have treated those who think differently or display their intelligence differently in a less than humane manner, shall we say. We can find examples of this from ancient Sparta, a city in ancient Greece, where they would take individuals, infants who were not deemed to be worthy of the state, and they would not allow them to grow or live, to be quite honest. And to me, one of the strengths of special education and American culture in general is that we tend to celebrate diversity, and in special education you are allowed a lot of different ways that you can display your knowledge. You don't just have to do it pencil to paper. You can sit down and talk with your teacher. You can find alternative ways of completing an assignment. So to me, it's that idea that in this country, in our country, despite all of our problems today with division, racism, sexism, a nationalism that seems to be going on quite a lot throughout our politics, that in this country we allow individuals, and we recognize that individuals who just simply display their intelligence in a different way than a general education student, we foster, nurture, and try to create equity. Not equality. Equality is different, but equity is where you actually take the playing field and level it. And so those are some of the reasons why I got into special education. You know, and also on a personal note, when I was younger, back in elementary school, we had students at my elementary school who were resource and then of course special education, and I saw how they were treated back in the early 1980s, and we've come a long ways since then. I'm dating myself. And it oftentimes made me feel, well, a little sad that that kind of bullying would go on, and I try to keep that in mind when I'm dealing with students within my class. Now, one thing that is quite a bit different than special education is that special education students are referred quite more often than general education students, and that's something that here at Mount Si it's been talked about in staff meetings. Mr. Belcher's on it, the administration's on it. And for me personally, I try not to refer in my class to administration, because in the back of my mind I know that those instances of bullying, targeting, and ridicule have happened to most likely all of my students, you know, despite their learning exceptionality. So that's one of the reasons that in this room, it's strict, fair, but I do have quite a bit of tolerance when it comes to acting out. In certain instances, if it comes down to a safety issue, I won't tolerate it. You know, I hope this information has been helpful to general education peers. It is very similar to what Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954 did with segregation in the southern part of the United States with African Americans and white schools. So that's a bit of the history. It has been, quite honestly, not an easy endeavor to carry out, and oftentimes it is very costly, not just in man hours, but money, budgets for school districts. But definitely, like I said at the beginning, I think it's a worthy cause, because in this country, what makes the United States exceptional is that instead of focusing on our negative differences, we try to celebrate our differences, and we do not belittle. We should not belittle one group versus the other. That's just my personal opinion, and I think that's one thing that special education stands for. That'll be 19.